Ladies and gentlemen, fasten your seatbelts because the purple wave is crashing back onto the global stage. The year is 2026, and the Kings have officially returned. RM, Jin, Suga, J-Hope, Jimin, V, and Jungkook are ready to conquer the world again, breaking records and healing souls with a production scale that defies imagination. But hold on, amidst the deafening screams and sold-out stadiums, a deafening silence echoes from specific corners of the globe. Not every army will see the purple lights. There are rumors, whispers of a blacklist, 7 specific nations that, despite having millions of diehard fans, have been crossed off the map for the 2026 World Tour. Why? Is it a diplomatic nightmare, a logistical impossibility, or perhaps a safety concern so severe that HYBE simply couldn't take the risk? Tonight, we aren't just looking at a concert schedule. We are peeling back the layers of international relations, economic crises, and cultural clashes that keep the world's biggest boy band out. From heartbreaking visa denials to venues that literally cannot handle the magnitude of the production, this is a deep dive into the forbidden zones of K-pop. Which major powerhouse got skipped? Which desperate fanbase is left crying in the dark? And what does this say about the complex reality of global touring in the modern era? Prepare your hearts, because the truth might hurt. This is the top 7 countries blacklisted from the BTS World Tour 2026.
Number 7, Russia, the frozen fortress of sanctions, where the Purple Ocean cannot flow. Ladies and gentlemen, we begin our countdown with a nation that occupies a staggering 1/8 of Earth's inhabited land area, a transcontinental behemoth that spans 11 time zones and holds a history as deep and complex as the ocean itself. This is Russia. For years, the Russian army has been one of the most passionate, resilient, and dedicated fan bases on the planet, organizing flash mobs in the shadow of the Kremlin and lighting up the harsh winters with the warmth of their fandom. But for the BTS World Tour 2026, Russia sits firmly at number 7 on the blacklist, and the reason is a heartbreaking cocktail of geopolitical ice, financial impossibility, and a logistical nightmare that even HYBE's billions cannot solve. To understand why this massive market is being skipped, we have to look beyond just politics and dive into the cold, hard mechanics of global touring in the modern era. The primary culprit here is the impenetrable wall of international sanctions that by 2026 have calcified into what experts are calling the Iron Curtain 2.0. When you plan a tour of this magnitude, we are talking about a production rumored to involve a floating zero-gravity stage, over 200 tons of equipment, and a traveling crew of 400 people. You are not just a band, you are a multinational corporation moving across borders. The first and most fatal hurdle is the swift banking ban. In the world of high-stakes entertainment, touring is a game of cash flow. Venues need to be paid in advance, local promoters need to transfer millions of dollars in guarantees to HYBE's accounts in Seoul, and merchandise revenue needs to be repatriated. With Russia largely disconnected from the global SWIFT banking system, there is physically no legal electronic highway for the money to travel. Imagine a scenario where a local promoter in Moscow has the millions to pay for the show, but the digital bridges to send that money are burned. It's a financial dead end. But let's play devil's advocate for a second and say, hypothetically, they solved the money issue using third-party intermediaries or cryptocurrency. You then run into the second, even more insurmountable wall: insurance. The BTS 2026 Eternal Tour is insured by global giants, likely syndicates based in London or New York. These insurance policies cover everything from a member twisting an ankle to a stage light falling down. However, these policies have strict excluded territories clauses. Due to the ongoing volatility and the diplomatic freeze between Russia and the West, and by extension, South Korea's alignment with Western allies, no major insurance underwriter will cover a multi-million-dollar asset entering Russian territory. If a single truck breaks down, if a piece of equipment is seized at customs, or if, God forbid, a security incident occurs, the tour would be on the hook for hundreds of millions of dollars with zero coverage. It is a risk that could bankrupt a smaller agency and severely damage even a giant like HYBE. Furthermore, we must talk about the logistics of the Great Equipment Migration. BTS's 2026 stage is not something you can just pack into a suitcase. It travels in a convoy of over 50 semi-trucks or requires dedicated 747 cargo planes. The airspace bans in place mean that flying equipment directly into Moscow is impossible for carriers registered in many nations. The alternative? Trucking it in. But look at the map. The borders are tight, the customs checks are agonizingly slow, and the risk of equipment being held up for weeks for inspection is too high. A tour schedule is a house of cards. If you are delayed by 48 hours at the Russian border, you miss the next show in Berlin or Paris, triggering a domino effect of lawsuits and cancellations. Then there is the atmosphere of the venue itself. The Luzhniki Stadium is magnificent, yes, but in 2026, the safety protocols required for a K-pop supergroup are intense. The South Korean government has strict travel advisories for its citizens, sending 7 national treasures, some of whom have served in the military and hold diplomatic passports, into a zone designated as high tension is a diplomatic nightmare. The South Korean Ministry of Foreign Affairs would likely intervene before a single ticket could be sold. It's not about fear, it's about state-level protocol. And let's not forget the cultural friction. While the Russian youth are incredibly open and globalized, the tightening grip of conservative legislation regarding non-traditional values in the country poses a direct ideological conflict with the core message of BTS, which is about inclusivity, freedom of expression, and breaking norms. Would the members be allowed to speak freely on stage? Would the love yourself message be censored? These are questions HYBE cannot answer with certainty, and where there is uncertainty, there is a blacklist. The tragedy here is palpable. If you look at social media, the Russian armies are still streaming, still voting, still loving. They are the ghost fandom of this tour, massive in number, but invisible on the official schedule. They have survived the long winter of isolation, hoping that music would transcend borders, but in 2026, the borders are higher than the music. It serves as a grim reminder that in the edutainment analysis of global touring, art is never truly separate from politics. The exclusion of Russia isn't a snub, it's a casualty of a fractured world. The stage will remain dark in Moscow, leaving millions of Purple Hearts beating in the silence of the taiga, proving that sometimes the most powerful force in the world isn't love, it's logistics and legislation.
Number 6. China, the Great Wall of Silence, where the biggest spenders are left in the cold, locked out by the ghosts of geopolitics and cultural crackdowns. Moving down our list to number 6, we encounter a paradox so massive it threatens to swallow the entire music industry whole. We are landing in the People's Republic of China, a nation that arguably holds the single most powerful economic key to BTS's global dominance, yet remains an impregnable fortress against their physical presence. This is the tragic irony of the Middle Kingdom. If you look at the raw data, the sheer purchasing power of the Chinese army, often organized through massive bars like the V-Bar or Jamin Bar, is staggering. We are talking about fan bases that pool together millions of dollars in mere hours to buy hundreds of thousands of albums, acting as the backbone for BTS's chart-topping achievements on the Billboard 200. These are the fans who pay for advertisements on the Burj Khalifa, who commission customized airplanes for birthdays, and who essentially bankroll the luxury status of K-pop. Yet, for the BTS 2026 Eternal World Tour, the map for China is completely blank. Not a single stop in Shanghai, no night at the Bird's Nest in Beijing, no show in Guangzhou. Why? Why ignore the hand that feeds you? To answer this, we have to navigate a minefield of diplomatic grudges, strict censorship laws, and a cultural reformation that views K-pop not as entertainment, but as a spiritual pollutant. The root of this blacklist goes back a decade to the infamous THAAD incident, where South Korea's deployment of a U.S. missile defense system led to Beijing enacting an unofficial yet suffocating Hallyu ban. While 2026 has seen some thawing, smaller indie acts or fan meetings occasionally slip through. A stadium tour by the biggest cultural asset of South Korea is a completely different beast. It is a symbol of soft power that Beijing is hesitant to host. But let's dig deeper into the edutainment facts of the Qinglong campaign. In recent years, China's cyberspace administration has launched a fierce crackdown on what they term chaotic fan culture. They have banned ranking lists, restricted bulk buying, which sea armies are famous for, and arguably most damagingly, targeted the aesthetic of nyongpao, or effeminate men. While BTS embodies healthy masculinity, their aesthetic, makeup, stylized hair, fluid fashion, clashes directly with the state's current push for a more rugged, traditional masculine image in media. For HYBE to bring the 2026 tour to China, they would likely face censorship demands that would strip the show of its soul. Imagine the members having to cover up tattoos, change choreography, or alter lyrics to appease local censors. It is a compromise the band, now in their mature artistic prime, simply would not make. Then there's the logistical nightmare of the permit system. In China, every single song, every costume, and every spoken word script must be submitted to the Ministry of Culture for approval months in advance. The risk of a last-minute technical difficulty cancellation, a common euphemism for political disapproval, is a financial Russian roulette. Imagine setting up a stage that costs $10 million to transport, only to have the local authorities pull the plug 3 hours before doors open because a member wore a shirt with a controversial symbol or said something interpreted as politically sensitive 5 years ago. The insurance premiums alone for a Chinese leg of the tour would be astronomical, classified under political risk. Furthermore, we have to talk about the zero COVID shadow. While the pandemic is technically history in 2026, the trauma and the infrastructure of control remain. Large gatherings of 60,000 screaming youths are viewed by the state as potential vectors for social unrest, not just disease. The ability of BTS to mobilize millions is seen as a threat to social stability. The Chinese Communist Party prefers crowd control over crowd euphoria. This leads to a heartbreaking reality for sea armies. They are the atlas of the fandom, holding up the sky with their financial support, yet they are forced to be musical refugees. To see their idols, they must fly to Tokyo, Bangkok, or Singapore, injecting millions into other countries' economies instead of their own. It creates a fascinating economic distortion where China exports capital, fans spending money abroad, but imports nothing, no concert revenue. The exclusion of China from the 2026 tour isn't just a missed opportunity, it is a deliberate, calculated avoidance of a market where the rewards are high, but the trapdoors are everywhere. It's a testament to the fact that BTS has become too big, too influential, and too politically charged for a restrictive regime to handle. So, the bird's nest remains empty, a silent monument to what could have been the biggest concert in history, proving that even the bulletproof Boy Scouts cannot penetrate the Great Wall of bureaucracy.
Number 5. India, the sleeping giant of Asia, where 1 billion hearts break under the weight of logistics and taxes. We have arrived at the halfway mark of our countdown, number 5, and this entry carries the weight of 1 billion tears. We are landing in the vibrant, colorful, and wildly passionate land of India. This is not just a country, it is a continent of culture, a powerhouse of digital consumption and home to one of the most vocal sectors of the global army, the Desi Army. If we look at the raw data from Spotify, YouTube, and Weverse, India consistently ranks in the top 5 for BTS streaming consumption globally. You would think, logically, that a market this massive, with a youth population hungry for K-pop, would be a guaranteed stop on the BTS 2026 Eternal World Tour. In fact, leader RM, Kim Namjoon, has famously expressed his personal desire to visit and perform in India, igniting hope in millions of fans who have waited for over a decade. Yet, for the 2026 tour, India is tragically blacklisted. Why? How can the world's biggest band skip the world's most populous nation? The answer lies in a fascinating, albeit frustrating, lesson in mega-event infrastructure and bureaucratic labyrinths that even HYBE's influence cannot navigate. This is where the dream crashes into the hard concrete of reality. The first and crushing factor is the stadium dilemma. You might ask, but India has the Narendra Modi Stadium, the largest in the world. It holds 130,000 people. Yes, it does. But here is the edutainment technicality that kills the concert. Cricket stadiums are not concert stadiums. The BTS 2026 Eternal production is rumored to be the heaviest touring rig in history, featuring a massive floating LED ceiling and a suspended moon mechanism that requires a roof load capacity of over 300 tons. Most cricket stadiums in India are designed as open-air bowls. They lack the structural steel roof grids capable of supporting this specific type of suspended weight. To play there, BTS would have to construct a ground support system, essentially building a temporary building inside the stadium, which takes 7 days to build and 5 days to dismantle. In a tight global touring schedule where every day costs millions in overhead, spending 2 weeks in one city for just 2 nights of shows is a logistical suicide. The load-in, load-out efficiency score for Indian venues unfortunately falls below the threshold required for the lightning-fast pace of the 2026 tour. Then, we must discuss the customs quagmire. A tour of this magnitude travels with roughly 60 shipping containers or 7 Boeing 747 freighters of gear. India's ATA Carnet laws, the passport for goods, are notoriously complex and time-consuming. There are horror stories in the industry of equipment being held at Mumbai ports for weeks due to minor paperwork discrepancies. For a tour that operates like a Swiss watch, where the gear from Bangkok needs to be in Delhi in 48 hours, the risk of a customs freeze is simply too high. If the stage doesn't clear customs in time, the show is cancelled. Insurance claims spike, and the band's reputation takes a hit. The HYBE's risk assessment team likely looked at the port clearance times and flashed a giant red light. It is a heartbreaking reality where bureaucracy strangles art. But the blacklist isn't just about steel and paper, it is about the price of passion. Let's talk about the economics. The entertainment tax structure in various Indian states can be aggressively high, sometimes pushing 25% to 40% on top of the ticket price. When you combine this with the weak exchange rate of the rupee against the US dollar in 2026, the ticket prices required to break even on a $10 million production would be astronomical for the average fan. HYBE faces a moral dilemma. Do they bring the show but charge $500 for a nosebleed seat, alienating the very fan base they love? Or do they skip the market entirely? The financial modeling suggests that despite the volume of fans, the revenue per capita in a stadium setting doesn't offset the massive cost of bringing the full production to the subcontinent. They could bring a light version of the stage, but BTS has a philosophy. Every fan gets the same show, whether in LA or Seoul. They refused to compromise the quality for India, which paradoxically led to the decision to skip it. Furthermore, there is the shadow of crowd control anxiety. The sheer density of the population in India scares Western and Korean safety consultants. After the tragedies in Itaewon and other global festivals in the early 2020s, the safety protocols for BTS 2026 are military grade. The concern isn't the fans' malice. Desi armies are known for their love and organization, but the sheer, unmanageable scale of the crowds outside the venue. The logistical challenge of securing a perimeter for 100,000 people in a hyper-dense city like Mumbai or Delhi, managing traffic flow and ensuring zero crush incidents requires city-level cooperation that is often hard to guarantee. The insurance underwriters, those invisible hands that control the music industry, likely demanded premiums so high for an Indian leg that it wiped out the potential profit margin. And finally, let's touch on the weather. The 2026 tour is scheduled to hit Asia during the pre-monsoon heatwave windows. Performing a high-intensity 3-hour choreography set in 40 degrees Celsius heat with 90% humidity is a severe health risk for the members, who are now in their 30s. We often forget that idols are human athletes. The thermal stress factor for open-air stadiums in India was flagged as a critical health risk for the members, specifically RM and Jimin, who have historically struggled with extreme heat exhaustion. So, the Purple Ocean will not rise in Mumbai. The tragedy of number 5 is the tragedy of unfulfilled potential. It is the story of a love affair between BTS and India that remains strictly digital, a romance of screens and streams, but never screams in person. The Desi Army remains the uncrowned queens of the fandom, tireless, massive, and loyal, yet forced to watch the magic from afar because their bridges are too slow, their roofs are too weak, and their taxes are too high. It's a harsh lesson that in the world of global entertainment, being the biggest fanbase.
Number 4. Argentina, the land of silver tears, where hyperinflation burns the stage and passion cannot pay the bills. We have reached number 4 on our list, and this entry strikes a chord of profound melancholy that resonates through the very soul of the fandom. We are traveling to the southern tip of the Americas, to a nation defined by a passion that borders on religious fervor, a land where football is God and music is the blood in their veins. This is Argentina. The exclusion of Argentina from the BTS 2026 Eternal World Tour is arguably the most emotionally devastating cut on this entire blacklist, specifically because the bond between BTS and this country is not just digital. It is deeply personal, historically solidified, and etched in the memories of 2022. Every army remembers where they were when Jin, the eldest member, flew halfway across the world to Buenos Aires to debut The Astronaut with Coldplay at the legendary River Plate Stadium. It was a moment of pure magic, a promise of a future reunion, a purple thread tying Seoul to Buenos Aires. But in 2026, that thread has been snapped, not by lack of love, but by the brutal, merciless mathematics of economics. Argentina sits at number 4 because it is currently trapped in a hyperinflationary spiral that makes the logistics of an international megatour statistically impossible. To understand this tragedy, we must turn our edutainment lens away from the stage and focus it on the terrifying world of global finance and currency exchange. In 2026, the Argentine economy is facing volatility that scares away even the bravest risk-takers in the music industry. The central villain here is the exchange rate nightmare. When HYBE plans a tour, they operate in US dollars or Korean won. A show of this magnitude costs roughly $4 million to $6 million USD per night just to break even, covering the jets, the pyro, the staff, the cargo, and the band's fee. In a stable economy, the local promoter sells tickets in the local currency, converts it to dollars, and wires the money to HYBE. In Argentina, this simple transaction has become a labyrinth of despair. The fluctuation of the Argentine peso is so erratic that the value of a ticket sold today might drop by 20 or 30% by the time the concert actually happens 3 months later. Imagine selling out a stadium and collecting millions of pesos, only to find that by the time you go to the bank to convert it to pay BTS, the money has evaporated into thin air due to devaluation. It is a financial black hole. But the problem goes deeper than just inflation. It is about the capital controls, or what locals call the cepo. The Argentine government, in a desperate attempt to stabilize the economy, has placed strict limits on the amount of US dollars that can be sent out of the country. This creates a liquidity trap for international artists. There are horror stories in the industry of major acts performing in Buenos Aires and then having their earnings trapped in the country for years, unable to be repatriated to their home accounts. For a publicly traded company like HYBE, which answers to shareholders and operates on quarterly earnings reports, having $10 million stuck in a frozen account in South America is a fiduciary disaster. They cannot risk the sunk cost. We must also discuss the blue dollar phenomenon, the parallel unofficial exchange rate that rules the streets. The disparity between the official bank rate and the real street value of money makes pricing tickets a mathematical impossibility. If the promoter prices tickets based on the official rate, they lose money. If they price it based on the blue dollar rate, the tickets become so astronomically expensive that the average Argentine fan, who is already struggling to buy groceries amidst the inflation, simply cannot afford them. This leads to the heartbreaking accessibility paradox. The Argentine army is massive, one of the loudest in the world, famous for their acampadas, camping outside venues for weeks, and their bogo, wild jumping energy that actually registers on seismographs. Yet economically, the demographic that loves BTS the most has been stripped of their purchasing power. To play in Argentina in 2026 would mean playing to a stadium of only the ultra-wealthy elite, completely betraying the populist, inclusive spirit of the BTS 2026 Eternal Tour. It creates a moral conflict for the members. How can they sing Spinebreaker, a song about the burden of cost on parents, while charging the equivalent of 6 months' average salary for a single ticket? The answer is, they can't. Furthermore, we must look at the logistical geopolitics of South America. A tour leg in South America is usually a package deal: Brazil, Chile, Argentina, and maybe Colombia. The cost of flying 500 tons of equipment down to the southern hemisphere is the most expensive travel line item on the entire tour budget. It only makes sense if the costs are amortized, spread out, across multiple stable shows. With Argentina's economy in the red zone, the anchor of the South American leg becomes unstable. Brazil alone can carry the weight, but without the Buenos Aires stop to share the freight costs,
Number 3. The Philippines. The pearl of the Orient Seas, where the traffic stops time and the biggest arena becomes a logistical tomb. We have now entered the top 3, the danger zone, the heartbreak hotel of our countdown. And for number 3, we are touching down in a nation that is arguably the beating heart of the Hallyu wave in Southeast Asia. This is the Philippines. If you know anything about K-pop, you know that the Pearl Army, the Filipino fans, are legendary. They are the loudest, the most online, and the most fiercely dedicated fanbase capable of trending a hashtag worldwide in nearly 3 seconds flat. They hold the record for some of the highest streaming volumes on Spotify and YouTube relative to population. The love affair between BTS and the Philippines goes back to the humble beginnings of the Red Bullet Tour, a bond forged in sweat and tears. So why, in the name of all that is holy, is the Philippines blacklisted from the BTS 2026 Eternal World Tour? Why is the map of Southeast Asia missing its most vibrant dot? The answer is a chaotic, frustrating, and purely physical reality that no amount of passion can fix: severe infrastructural paralysis. While other countries were cut for politics or money, the Philippines is being skipped because, quite literally, the tour cannot move through the veins of the city. We have to talk about the venue, the villain of this story, the Philippine Arena. Located in Bulacan, just north of Manila, it is technically the world's largest indoor arena, a colossus that holds 55,000 people. On paper, it looks perfect. In reality, for a production of the 2026 scale, it is a logistical death trap. The BTS 2026 Eternal Tour travels with a convoy of 65 massive 18-wheeler semi-trucks carrying the zero-gravity stage, the hydraulics, and the massive LED monoliths. To get these trucks from the port or the airport to the arena, they must navigate the NLEX, North Luzon Expressway. In 2026, the traffic situation in Metro Manila and its outskirts has reached what urban planners call terminal saturation. We are talking about gridlock so severe that a 30-kilometer journey can take 5 to 6 hours. For a global tour that operates on military precision timing, where every minute of load-in is accounted for in the budget, losing 6 hours in traffic is not an inconvenience, it is a breach of contract. Imagine the scenario. The convoy leaves the port but gets stuck in a Carmageddon on the NLEX. The trucks arrive at the venue 8 hours late. The stage crew, who are unionized and have strict turnaround times for rest, cannot start building. The sound check is canceled. The doors open late. The show is compromised.
HYBE's logistics directors likely looked at the traffic data, the truck ban hours imposed by local municipalities, and the sheer unpredictability of Manila's road network and realized that the risk of the equipment not arriving on time was nearly 100%. But the nightmare doesn't stop at the asphalt. We must discuss the accommodation deficit. The Philippine Arena is located in a somewhat isolated area in Bulacan, far from the luxury hotel districts of Makati or BGC, Bonifacio Global City, where the members, the executives, and the A-list crew need to stay for security and comfort standards. In 2026, the travel time between the hotel and the venue is a soul-crushing 3 to 4 hours one way due to the congestion. You cannot ask the world's biggest pop stars to sit in a van for 8 hours a day just to commute to their own concert. It creates a fatigue risk that insurance companies flag immediately. They could use helicopters, yes, but you cannot helicopter in 400 crew members. The logistics of moving the human army behind BTS is just as impossible as moving the steel stage. Furthermore, we need to address the acoustic nightmare. The Philippine Arena was built for size, not for the high-fidelity 360-degree immersive sonic experience that the Eternal Tour demands. The venue is essentially a massive concrete cavern. To make it sound acceptable for a K-pop production, which relies on crisp vocals and heavy bass, the tour would need to bring in additional sound-dampening infrastructure, essentially draping the entire ceiling in acoustic fabric. This adds another 24 hours to the setup time, which, as we established, they don't have because of the traffic. It is a domino effect of failure. Then there's the issue of the airport. The Ninoy Aquino International Airport, NNIA, has long been cited as one of the most congested gateways in the world. For the 2026 tour, BTS is utilizing dedicated Boeing 747 freighters to move their air cargo priority tier. The slot availability for cargo planes at NNIA is notoriously tight, often forcing flights to land at Clark International Airport, which is even further away, compounding the trucking issue mentioned earlier. The logistics chain breaks at every single link in the Philippines. We also have to touch on a sensitive but real issue, the scalper bot wars. The Philippines has one of the most aggressive, unregulated secondary ticketing markets in Asia. In previous K-pop concerts, up to 60% of tickets were snatched by auto-clicker bots within milliseconds, only to be resold at 10 times the price on social media. HYBE's 2026 tour utilizes a new fan identity blockchain ticketing system to prevent this, but the local internet infrastructure and the lack of legislation against scalper syndicates in the Philippines create a technical incompatibility. HYBE refuses to let their fans be exploited, and without a guarantee from local promoters that the bot farms can be blocked, they pulled the plug. It is a moral stance against the exploitation of the Pearl Army. And let's not forget the typhoon factor. The 2026 tour leg for Asia falls squarely in the wet season. While the arena is indoors, the queuing area, the merch stands, and the holding areas for thousands of fans are outside. The risk of a super typhoon flooding the NLEX, cutting off access to the arena entirely, which has happened before, is a force majeure risk that makes the event uninsurable. If the roads flood, the show effectively doesn't exist, even if the stage is built. The cancellation of the Philippines stop is a tragedy of so close, yet so far. The fans are there, the money is there, the love is overflowing, but the physical reality of the city, the concrete, the cars, the floods, and the lack of urban planning has built a wall that BTS cannot cross. It is a heartbreaking lesson in edutainment that highlights how a country's infrastructure is just as important as its culture. You can have the best singers in the world, but if you don't have the roads to drive them on, the music stops before it even begins. The Pearl of the Orient Seas will remain silent, not for lack of trying, but because the city itself is choked, leaving millions of Filipino army to stream the concert from their phones while stuck in the very traffic that kept their idols away.
Number 2. Mexico. The Clash of Titans, where the god of football steals the stage and the Aztec sun burns too bright for the purple moon. We have reached the penultimate spot, number 2, the runner-up of heartbreak, and we are flying to a land that defines passion, a nation where the ground literally shakes when the fans jump. We are touching down in Mexico. The exclusion of Mexico from the BTS 2026 Eternal World Tour is not just a surprise. It is a seismic shock that has sent tremors through the entire Latin American music industry. For years, the Mexican army has been the gold standard of fandom energy. They are the ones who camp out for days, the ones whose fan chants are loud enough to be registered as minor earthquakes, and the ones who have turned K-pop from a niche genre into a mainstream juggernaut in the Spanish-speaking world. The BTS in Mexico concert movie screenings consistently outsell Hollywood blockbusters here. So why? Why would HYBE skip a guaranteed payday and a guaranteed legacy show at the legendary Estadio Azteca? The answer is a fascinating, perfectly timed collision of history, sports, and geography that creates the perfect storm of impossibility. The villain in this story isn't a politician or a bank. It is another global phenomenon. In 2026, Mexico is one of the host nations for the FIFA World Cup. This massive sporting event is the primary reason why BTS cannot set foot on Mexican soil this year. And the details behind this clash of titans offer a masterclass in the ruthless world of mega event logistics. Let's break down the FIFA lockout. You might think, the World Cup is only 1 month, surely they can play before or after. It is not that simple. When a stadium like the Estadio Azteca, Mexico City, Estadio Akron, Guadalajara, or Estadio BBVA, Monterrey, signs a contract with FIFA, they enter into what is known as an exclusive use period. This period begins roughly 3 to 4 months before the first kickoff. During this time, the stadium essentially becomes the sovereign territory of FIFA. The grass is ripped up and replaced with tournament-grade turf that cannot be touched by a concert stage. Extensive renovations are carried out to meet international broadcast standards. The locker rooms, the tunnels, and even the parking lots are commandeered for FIFA logistics, security sweeps, and sponsor activations. For the BTS 2026 Eternal Tour, which is scheduled to run through the Americas in the late spring and summer, directly overlapping with the World Cup preparation and tournament window, there are physically no stadiums available. They are all sterile zones. It is a case where the biggest boy band in the world ran into the only thing bigger than them, the World Cup. But the problem extends beyond the grass. We must talk about the logistical cannibalization. Hosting a World Cup sucks the oxygen out of a country's infrastructure. In 2026, the hotel occupancy rates in Mexico City, Monterrey, and Guadalajara are projected to be at 100% capacity, with prices surging by 500 to 800%. Airlines are fully booked moving teams, delegations, and football tourists. For the touring party the size of BTS, remember we are talking about 400 people, from dancers to pyrotechnicians to caterers. Finding accommodation is a statistical impossibility. Even if they could find rooms, the cost would blow the tour budget out of the water. The production logistics are equally grim. The trucks, the cranes, the forklifts, and the specialized labor required to build the BTS stage are the exact same resources required to build the FIFA fan fests and broadcast centers. Mexico's entertainment infrastructure is completely monopolized for football for the entirety of 2026. There are simply no trucks left to rent, no stagehands left to hire, and no generators left to power the show. It is a supply chain blackout. However, even if the World Cup weren't happening, there is another silent killer that has placed Mexico on the caution list for the 2026 tour: the altitude factor versus the eternal set list. The 2026 tour is rumored to be the most physically demanding performance BTS has ever created, featuring a non-stop 3.5-hour runtime with high-intensity choreography designed to showcase their eternal youth. Mexico City sits at 2,240 meters, 7,350 feet above sea level. At this altitude, the effective oxygen is about 25% less than at sea level. In previous years, we have seen members like Jimin and Jungkook require oxygen masks side stage during shorter sets. For the eternal production, the medical risk assessment conducted by HYBE's team allegedly flagged the hypoxia risk as critical. The insurance premiums to cover the potential hospitalization of a member due to altitude sickness during a live broadcasted event were astronomical. To modify the show, to make it slower or easier for the altitude, would go against the no-compromise ethos of the tour. They essentially had to choose between risking the members' health or skipping the city. They chose health. Then we must address the ticketing monopoly war. In Mexico, the live event market is dominated by a single player, OCESA/Ticketmaster, with a grip so tight it has sparked government investigations. Following the disastrous Bad Bunny incident of previous years, where thousands of legitimate ticket holders were denied entry due to system errors and massive cloning fraud, HYBE has grown incredibly wary of the local ticketing infrastructure. The BTS 2026 Eternal Tour uses a proprietary Weverse dynamic blockchain ticket to guarantee fan safety, but integrating this system into the legacy infrastructure of Mexico's monopoly proved to be a legal and technical nightmare. The local controllers refused to yield data access to HYBE, and HYBE refused to let their fans walk into a potential fraud trap. It was a corporate standoff where neither side blinked, and the fans were the ones caught in the crossfire. Then we must address the security premium. While fans are safe inside the venue, the transport logistics for high-value assets in 2026 require what is known as K&R insurance for the executive staff and the equipment convoy. The security riders for the tour would require a federal police escort for every single movement of the 60-truck convoy to prevent cartel hijacking, a legitimate threat for high-tech equipment. The optics of a pop group moving through the city with a heavily armed military-grade convoy clash with the message of peace that BTS promotes. The atmosphere of militarization required to ensure safety was deemed too intense for the vibe of the tour. So the Estadio Azteca will roar this year, but it will be for goals, not for dynamite. The exclusion of Mexico is a tragedy of timing. If the tour were in 2025 or 2027, it would be a guaranteed stop. But in 2026, the calendar gods were cruel. The Mexican army, the passionate güeros of the fandom, are left with a bitter pill to swallow. Their country is the center of the world's attention this year, but for the one thing they truly wanted, the doors are locked. The Cielito Lindo will be sung in the streets, but the Seven Kings will not be there to hear it, blocked by a soccer ball, a mountain of thin air, and a calendar that simply had no space for purple.
Number 1. Indonesia. The archipelago of broken dreams, where the biggest army in the world is defeated by the invisible monster of infrastructure and bureaucracy. Ladies and gentlemen, hold your breath. Clutch your light sticks and prepare for the final, most devastating revelation of the night. We have traveled across continents, from the frozen plains of Russia to the traffic-choked streets of Manila, but nothing, absolutely nothing compares to the tragedy of number 1. We are landing in the Emerald of the Equator, the nation that consistently tops every single digital metric for BTS consumption, the home of the legendary Indomie. This is Indonesia.
The exclusion of Indonesia from the BTS 2026 Eternal World Tour is not just a blacklist, it is a cultural heartbreak of epic proportions. To understand why the country with arguably the largest, most dedicated, and most vocally powerful ARMY fanbase in the entire world is being skipped, we have to peel back the layers of a complex, systemic failure that goes far beyond music. This is a story about a city choking on its own growth, a venue that is a golden cage, and a bureaucratic labyrinth that scares away even the most powerful entertainment companies on Earth. The primary antagonist in this saga is the venue itself, the Jakarta International Stadium, or JIS. In 2026, JIS stands as a colossal architectural marvel, a monolithic structure capable of holding 82,000 people, theoretically the perfect throne for the kings of K-pop. However, for the HYBE global touring directors, JIS is classified as a logistical death trap. The issue isn't the stadium, it's the last mile problem. Despite years of promises, the access roads surrounding the stadium in 2026 remain critically insufficient for a crowd of this magnitude. We are talking about a funnel effect, where 80,000 people are trying to exit through narrow bottlenecks into a residential neighborhood that was never designed for mega events. The ghost of the Itaewon tragedy still haunts the industry, and HYBE's safety consultants ran simulations predicting a crush asphyxia risk of over 85% during the post-concert dispersal at JIS. The lack of integrated high-capacity mass transit directly connected to the stadium gates means that the crowd cannot disperse quickly. In simulations, it took nearly 5 hours to clear the area safely. For a band that prioritizes fan safety above profit, this was an immediate deal-breaker. They cannot invite their fans to a venue where the simple act of going home could be life-threatening. But the nightmare extends into the very air we breathe. We must discuss the atmospheric veto. In 2026, Jakarta's Air Quality Index, AQI, has solidified its reputation as the Grey Dome. During the dry season tour window, the PM 2.5 levels in Jakarta frequently hit the hazardous range, often exceeding 160 or 170. For a high-octane performance like BTS's, where Jungkook and J-Hope are sprinting across a 100-meter stage while belting out high notes, the air quality acts as a literal poison. The respiratory risk assessment for the members, whose vocal cords are insured for millions of dollars, flagged Jakarta as a red zone. Performing for 3 hours in that level of pollution is medically equivalent to smoking 2 packs of cigarettes on stage. It is an environmental tragedy where the climate crisis directly assassinates cultural joy. Then we descend into the murky underworld of the promoter mafia and the scalper syndicates. Indonesia has a notorious reputation in the global touring industry for the phenomenon of ordal, or orang dalam, or insiders. In negotiations for the 2026 tour, HYBE demanded a 100% transparent, blockchain-based ticketing system to ensure that true fans, the students, the workers, the people who saved up for years, got the tickets at face value. However, the local ecosystem in Indonesia is plagued by a network of bot farmers and insider trading, where up to 40% of VIP tickets are siphoned off to government officials, influencers, and connections before the public sale even begins. HYBE's audit of previous major K-pop concerts in Jakarta revealed a ticket leakage rate that violated their corporate ethics policy. They could not find a local partner willing to guarantee the clean hands protocol they demanded. The risk of a PR disaster, where regular fans are crying outside while scalpers sell tickets for $2,000 inside, was a brand risk they weren't willing to take. Furthermore, we must talk about the customs quagmire, or the red line horror. Bringing the BTS 2026 Eternal production to Indonesia involves importing 80 containers of highly specialized, custom-built electronics, lasers, and stage hydraulics. The Indonesian customs process, notoriously unpredictable and prone to pungli, or unofficial fees, creates a terrifying uncertainty. There is a very real fear that the equipment could be held hostage at the Tanjung Priok port for inspection days before the show, effectively holding the concert for ransom. In a tightly wound global schedule, where a delay in Jakarta means missing the next flight to Sydney, the bureaucratic friction of Indonesia is simply too high. The cost of greasing the wheels to ensure the gear moves on time would not only be illegal under South Korean corporate law, but would also destroy the profit margin. And let's not forget the permit roller coaster. In Indonesia, concert permits are often issued by the police at the very last minute, sometimes days or even hours before the event, subject to the whims of local political stability or religious organizations. With the 2026 political climate in Indonesia settling into a new equilibrium, the crowd gathering permit becomes a political football. HYBE requires permits to be secured 6 months in advance to greenlight the insurance. The Indonesian authorities simply do not operate on that timeline. The uncertainty of will the show happen hangs over the event until the first song plays. For a billion-dollar production, maybe is not an answer. And finally, there is the heartbreaking irony of the digital paradox. The Indonesian army dominates the internet. They trend hashtags, they win billboard votes, they stream butter and dynamite until the servers crash. They are the engine of BTS's global popularity. But in the physical world, the infrastructure of their home cannot support the weight of their love. The roads are too small, the air is too thick, the red tape is too sticky, and the system is too broken. The purple ocean that should have filled the JIS, lighting up the Jakarta sky, will instead remain a digital wave, trapped behind screens. It is the ultimate tragedy of the 2026 blacklist. The country that loves them the most is the one place they cannot go, proving that passion alone cannot build bridges, clear the sky, or fix a broken system. Indonesia remains the crown jewel that cannot be worn, the loudest voice that will scream into the void, waiting for a day when the sea is ready to welcome the kings. Until then, the #1 spot on the blacklist serves as a somber monument to potential lost to reality.